Most people think debt is simple. You borrow money, you pay it back. End of story. But what if I told you the modern world no longer works that way? Right now, every major country on Earth is drowning in debt. The United States owes more than $38 trillion. Europe carries trillions more. Japan's debt is so large, it has surpassed 250% of its entire economy. And yet, the system keeps moving. No collapse, no final payment, no one knocking on the door demanding the money back, which raises a strange question. If everybody owes money, who exactly is owed? Because when you follow the trail long enough, something unsettling appears. The world economy is no longer built on money. It's built on belief. And that belief may be the most powerful illusion in human history. This is The Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide. And tonight, we're uncovering the secret architecture holding modern civilization together. Because the truth is darker than most people realize. The global economy was never designed to become debt-free. It was designed to keep rolling forever. And if that trust ever breaks, the consequences won't just be economic. They'll be civilizational. For most of human history, debt meant danger. Kings borrowed money only during emergencies, usually war, and if they failed to repay it, kingdoms collapsed. But in 1694, something changed. England was at war with France. Gold reserves were vanishing. The crown was desperate. So the government approached wealthy merchants with an offer that would change history forever. Lend us money today, and we'll repay you later with interest funded by future taxes. That single promise created an entirely new system. To manage it, the Bank of England was born, and with it came something revolutionary: government bonds. For the first time in history, governments discovered they could spend money they didn't yet possess. And investors discovered something even more valuable than gold: predictable interest. The implications were enormous. Empires no longer needed to conquer land for treasure. Now they could finance expansion through debt. War itself became financialized. The battlefield slowly transformed into a balance sheet. And over the next 3 centuries, nearly every major power copied the model. France, the Netherlands, the United States. Debt stopped being a sign of weakness. It became a sign of power. Because the nations that could borrow the most could dominate the world the longest. But here's where things become strange. Today, global debt has exploded beyond anything humanity has ever seen. Over $315 trillion. That's nearly 3 times larger than the entire global economy combined. Pause for a moment and think about that. How can the world owe more money than the world actually produces? That sounds impossible. And yet, it's true. Because modern debt no longer functions like household debt. Governments aren't trying to eliminate it. They're trying to sustain it. That changes everything. Take the United States. People constantly say, America owes China. But that's only partially true. China holds less than $1 trillion in U.S. treasuries. America's total debt is over $38 trillion. Most of that debt is actually owed internally. American banks own it. Pension funds own it. Insurance companies own it. The Federal Reserve owns enormous portions of it. In other words, America largely owes money to itself. And this is where the illusion deepens. The government issues bonds. Financial institutions buy them. The Federal Reserve creates new dollars and sometimes buys them back. Taxpayers pay interest. That interest flows into retirement accounts and investment portfolios. Money circles endlessly through the same machine. The debtor and the creditor begin to blur together. And America isn't unique. Japan lends to the United States. The U.S. lends internationally through institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Developing nations buy Western bonds using their foreign reserves. Everyone becomes connected through promises. It's like a giant poker table where every player borrowed chips from the person beside them. And the game only works as long as nobody stands up. That's the part most people never realize. The modern economy survives on confidence. Not repayment. Confidence. As long as investors believe governments can continue paying interest, the system survives, even if the debt itself is never fully repaid. And historically, that confidence has allowed governments to push debt to unimaginable levels. But confidence is fragile. We saw it in Greece. In 2010, investors suddenly lost faith in the Greek government's ability to manage its debt. Bond yields exploded. Markets panicked. The European Central Bank and IMF intervened, but the rescue came with a brutal cost: austerity, mass unemployment, wage cuts, tax increases. For millions of ordinary people, debt stopped being abstract. It became personal. And Greece wasn't alone. Argentina defaulted repeatedly. Sri Lanka spiraled into shortages and unrest when foreign reserves collapsed. Every time the system cracks, the invisible creditors suddenly become visible. The IMF, the bond markets, credit rating agencies, global investors deciding, almost overnight, whether an economy survives or suffocates. Because in the modern world, markets don't just influence governments, they discipline them. And above all of it sits the modern central bank, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan. These institutions don't simply manage money. They manufacture the foundation of the system itself. Every time a central bank buys government bonds, it injects newly created money into the economy. One balance sheet expands. Another receives liquidity. Debt becomes money. And that leads to one of the strangest truths in finance. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every dollar represents somebody's liability. Every currency unit exists because debt exists somewhere else in the system. The deeper you look, the more the entire structure begins to resemble a carefully balanced illusion. But here's the most important part. The system was never built to fully repay the debt. That was never the plan. Governments refinance old debt with new debt, again and again and again. Economists call this rolling over debt. But in reality, it behaves more like a permanent subscription model, and the world economy now depends on it. Think about what would happen if the United States suddenly paid off all $38 trillion tomorrow. At first, that sounds amazing. No debt, no burden, no crisis. But the reality would be catastrophic. Banks, pension funds, and financial institutions around the world would lose one of their safest assets overnight. The global supply of dollars would shrink dramatically. Credit markets could freeze. Deflation would spread. The very act of eliminating the debt could destabilize the system itself. That's why governments continue issuing more. Not because they're irrational, because the machine now requires it. Debt has become the heartbeat of modern capitalism. Every mortgage, every pension fund, every treasury market, every financial institution, all connected by rolling promises about the future. And as long as people believe those promises, the system continues. But belief is not distributed equally. This is where the story stops being purely economic and becomes social. Because when governments pay interest on debt, who ultimately receives that money? Mostly the institutions and individuals who already own financial assets. That means debt quietly transfers wealth upward over time, from workers to asset holders, from taxpayers to creditors. This is one reason inequality continues expanding across much of the world. The system rewards ownership of debt more than labor itself. And yet, the irony is unavoidable. Most ordinary people are participating in both sides without realizing it. Your pension may hold government bonds. Your taxes may help pay interest on those bonds. You are both inside the machine and feeding it simultaneously. That's why there is no single villain in this story. Not China, not Wall Street, not central banks alone. The modern financial system became too interconnected for simple enemies. Debt is now woven into civilization itself. And maybe that's the most unsettling realization of all. Because civilizations in the past were built on gold, land, and military force, modern civilization is built on confidence, pure confidence. Confidence that currencies will hold value. Confidence that governments can refinance endlessly. Confidence that tomorrow's growth will justify today's promises. And confidence is powerful until the moment it disappears. Because history shows the same pattern again and again. Systems that rely entirely on belief can survive for decades, sometimes centuries, right until the moment they suddenly don't. That's the real danger of debt. Not the numbers themselves, not even the trillions. The danger is psychological. The moment enough people stop believing the promises can continue forever, the entire structure begins to shake. Interest rates surge. Markets panic. Liquidity disappears. And governments that once looked invincible suddenly appear fragile. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But balance only exists while trust survives. And if that trust breaks, the world won't simply face a recession. It may face a reckoning with the uncomfortable truth hiding beneath modern civilization. The global economy no longer runs on gold. It runs on belief. And belief is the most fragile currency humanity has ever created. If this changed the way you see the world, subscribe to the channel, because history leaves clues everywhere. Most people just never learn where to look.